Before this video begins, I would like to give a quick thank you to my Asbantium level patrons Fallon Cortez and Nathan Gibson. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. So recently news broke about a new Doctor Who spin-off centering around UNIT. Doctor Who hasn't had a spin-off show since the ill-fated Class back in 2016. Yeah, that was 7 years ago. I feel old too. Former showrunner Chris Chibnall has stated that he wanted to do spin-offs but wasn't given the green light. But it seems Russell T Davies is so popular and beloved that he's already been given a spin-off before his second era has even properly begun. This new UNIT spin-off is still officially unconfirmed, but it's been reported on pretty concretely, and Davies had already been stating his intent to expand the Doctor Who media empire with more spin-offs. So it's safe to say that this spin-off is pretty much a lock by this point. It's been a long time since we've had a full-blown TV Doctor Who spin-off, so it's a really exciting time. Naturally, I thought it would be interesting to go through some of the things I think the UNIT spin-off needs to do in order to be successful. Obviously, I don't expect it to do everything I mentioned in this video, but it would be nice if it did. And of course, be wary of spoilers for the following episodes, along with possible spoilers for episodes in the upcoming 60th anniversary specials and series 14. You've been warned, so no whining in the comments this time. 1. An identity and standalone appeal. I think the most important thing the UNIT show has to do is carve out its own identity. This was a big difference between the successes of Torchwood and Sarah Jane Adventures and the failures of K9 and Company and Class. One of the main reasons Class failed was because it didn't really have much of an identity. It was kind of in an awkward position of trying to appeal to adults with the edginess of Torchwood, whilst also appealing to teenagers with the school kid detective nature of Sarah Jane Adventures. It kind of got lost in itself and didn't really appeal to anyone in the end. This is why I think it's so significant for the UNIT spin-off to find its own identity and audience. The two successful spin-off shows knew exactly what they were and who they were for, so the UNIT show doing the same would do a lot in making it a success. It's also notable how standalone Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures were, because they were close enough to Doctor Who to have crossovers and coexist, but a lot of people watched Torchwood without even knowing it was a spin-off of Doctor Who. In fact, I'm pretty sure a lot of people in Germany saw Torchwood long before New Who started even being broadcast in the country. So if the UNIT series is able to sustain its own existence, it can last for many years along with becoming its own standalone entity. Hopefully the show can do that, because if it can't, then it runs the risk of becoming another Class and getting cancelled very early on. 2. Familiar faces. Another big difference between Class and the successful spin-offs was the familiar faces involved. Torchwood obviously had Doctor Who character Captain Jack, and Sarah Jane Adventures had, well, Sarah Jane Smith. These were beloved characters from the main show, so it made sense to build a whole spin-off around them. Class, on the other hand, had the headmaster from The Caretaker, who then died after the second episode, so there wasn't really that hook for people to actually watch. The UNIT show seems to have already solved this issue, because Kate Stewart appears to be the lead character in the show, something that will no doubt prove to be a draw, especially after her appearances in Series 13, 14 and Power of the Doctor. It also offers the possibility to flesh out Kate as a character, since she's been pretty one-note since her introduction back in Series 7. It's always been about my father. Much like the other spin-off leads, Kate needs to be made into a more interesting and layered character to drive the show, so it's important for Kate to be written well. I'd also love to see familiar faces return in guest roles, especially because Power of the Doctor suggested that former companions like Ace and Tegan have started working with UNIT. A grounded Earth-based show like this is ripe for familiar characters from the main show to appear. It would be the perfect opportunity to bring back Martha Jones, who worked for the organisation after she left the Doctor. Maybe we could also have the returns of Sarah Jane Adventures characters like journalist Rani or UNIT fanboy Clyde now that they've grown up, much like the audience of that other spin-off. There are so many existing characters that could make for great one-off or recurring characters in this UNIT show. I think it's something the spin-off needs to do, because the organisation is so well established within the universe of the show that it makes a lot of sense for familiar faces to show up. Even Malcolm. Come on, we all need a bit more Malcolm sometimes. 3. Interesting new characters. However, it would be a bad idea for this show to rely too much on the familiar established characters. It needs to introduce a lot of new and interesting characters of its own. The Big Finish UNIT stuff did this a lot, with a pretty decent split between characters the fans already knew and characters created for the series. Well, the early stuff did that at least. Now it's basically just a dartboard of established characters they can get for that week. Anyway, my point is, a brand new cast filled with new characters to explore makes the show so much more interesting and exciting to watch. It would be great to be introduced to a consistent team of operatives with defined characters and storylines, rather than it all just being about Kate Stewart and possibly Osgood, along with whichever former Doctor Who actors they can convince to appear in the show. I also wonder whether the show will follow that Torchwood formula of being focused more on a newcomer to serve as an audience surrogate, introducing the viewers to everything in the show. Obviously, Captain Jack was the main guy of Torchwood, but Gwen was meant to represent the audience in those early episodes, creating a reason for the show to spell everything out and deliver exposition in a productive way. The unit show will probably have to take a similar route in order to bring in the widest possible audience, so a completely original new central character like Sam Bishop would go a long way in making the show feel more varied and unique, rather than being the Kate and Osgood show. 4. Good monsters and villains. With any good Doctor Who spin-off, you need your rogues gallery of monsters and villains to fight against the main characters each and every week. Given that UNIT is a long-standing, resourceful and international organisation, there are a lot of possibilities for antagonists. Sarah Jane Adventures and Torchwood featured a lot of Doctor Who aliens like Sontarans, Jadoons, Cybermen and Slitheen, helping to use the show's existing threats in this Earthbound capacity. I fully expect the UNIT show to do the same, with infinite potential. There are Silurians and Zygons with long histories with UNIT, easily allowing them to appear like they have in Big Finish, and the same goes for the Ice Warriors and the Silence. Maybe we'd even see Autons show up, or more obscure threats like Plasmavorms, Krillitane and Krynoids. There's a lot of breathing room for alien invasions, and there are also bound to be a lot of new and creative monsters introduced as part of the show, just like those other spin-offs. I'm not saying the show needs to have a full-blown alien invasion every week, but the Doctor Who universe is so wild and aliens are so widespread that it would be a wasted potential to not include established monsters and villains in some capacity. I also like how there's enough vagueness about UNIT that a lot of episodes could even have regular human villains. Whether those are working for aliens or just abusing alien technology, there's plenty of room for the show's protagonists to come up against all sorts of interesting threats, which would do wonders for its appeal and longevity. 5. Tie up loose ends. A nice, understated part of Doctor Who's past spin-offs was their ability to tie up loose ends from the main show. Torchwood expanded upon the Cardiff Rift and explained what happened to Captain Jack after he was left behind by the Doctor. Sarah Jane Adventures dealt with surviving Sontarans from Series 4 and the Slitheen and their adjacent families after their appearances in Series 1. That show even dealt with the Alliance of Shades from the obscure, truly awful Doctor Who animated special Dreamland. But none of these shows compare to the potential of the UNIT spin-off, especially because the organisation essentially only exists to mop up after the Doctor. This show needs to wrap up some glaring loose ends from the main show, such as the Shoal of the Winter Harmony, who are implied to have infiltrated the organisation. There's also the Grand Serpent, who appeared in Series 13 as a villain Kate was fighting against, but he was never really explained and just kind of disappeared, never to be seen again. This UNIT show would be perfect for wrapping up these kinds of plot threads and using them as easy storylines considering their relation to the main show. 6. Maintain continuity. Similarly to those loose ends, I think it's important for the UNIT show to maintain a strong sense of continuity to the main show. After all, it's part of the Doctor Who universe, so it needs to keep consistency with Doctor Who itself. Torchwood stopped doing this after Series 2, with Children of Earth kind of being too horrific to feel like it takes place in the universe, and Miracle Day was flat out contradicted by Doctor Who Series 6. But before that, both spin-offs during the first Davis era had strong ties to the show itself, with crossovers both ways, especially during The Stolen Earth, which brought together all three shows for an epic two-part crossover. I'm not saying the exact same thing needs to happen with the UNIT show, because at this point Marvel and Star Wars have pretty much destroyed all the intrigue and appeal of crossover events. But I just think that the UNIT show needs to at least feel consistent with a wider Whoniverse, as Davis has officially dubbed it. Events that happen on the main show have to have some level of consequence in the spin-off show, because that interconnectivity is so significant for success. I know I mentioned earlier about the importance of these kinds of shows being standalone, but there's definitely a happy medium and a balance for the creators to strike. The point of any kind of spin-off is telling new stories and new styles of stories within a familiar and beloved universe. So this UNIT spin-off definitely needs to stay close enough to Doctor Who to draw in those fans and feel part of the universe, while still carving out its own niche and identity, which I have no doubts it will do. 7. Carry the Whoniverse through the off-season. This last one is perhaps my biggest wish, because we've recently been going through such long dry spells without any on-screen Doctor Who content. Episode counts have been dramatically reduced and there have been constant gap years with nothing to watch, so this UNIT spin-off and other potential shows would be a great way to keep Doctor Who relevant year round, even when the main show is in its off-season, so to speak. This is what Class did back in 2016, giving fans something to watch in a year where there was only one main show episode. We've already been told that Series 14 in early 2024 will be 8 or so episodes long, but if the unit show was to have a series later that year, the time between content will feel so much shorter. We'd be able to enjoy more of the on-screen Doctor Who universe without it all coming in one go before another long break. 2021 had 7 Doctor Who episodes and 2022 had just 3, with 2023 set for only 4 episodes. It's understandable that this isn't a cheap or easy show to make, so it's not a surprise that episode counts keep shrinking. But spin-offs can be a lot easier to make with recurring locations and characters, so they can really help pick up the slack for the brand. I don't think it's much of a coincidence that 2008 was pretty much the height of modern Doctor Who's popularity. You had Torchwood running from January to April, Doctor Who running from April to July, and then Sarah Jane Adventures running from September to December. That means there was only like 1 full month without any form of on-screen Doctor Who content, showing the incredible effect of using spin-offs to keep the media property relevant and popular even when the main show isn't on. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that the unit show will help to achieve this purpose for many years, alongside hopefully countless other spin-offs. And I swear that's not just because my channel's success is directly tied to the relevance of Doctor Who. So there you have it, those are some of the big things I want from the new unit spin-off now that it has been all but confirmed. It's not exactly a list of predictions per se, but more of a wish list if you will. I know I made a lot of comparisons to Torchwood and Sarah Jane Adventures, pretty much me pointing to them and being like, yeah, be like those. But that's because they're the blueprints for successful Doctor Who spin-offs. I mean, we don't exactly want the unit show to replicate K9 and Company, because that just sucked. There is so much potential for this show, something like the team-based format of Torchwood, but less edgy and for more of a universal audience. It's a shame this show wasn't a thing back in 2010, because then it would become huge in America on the CW and Sci-Fi. But then again, I guess I'm glad it wasn't, because those kinds of shows absolutely suck. Anyway, I'm really excited to see how the Doctor Who universe is going to be expanded through spin-offs during this new Russell T Davies era. It'll be fun to see the brand become bigger again and explore all sorts of new genres through these new avenues, because we've already seen in expanded media the interesting kinds of stories spin-offs can tell. Big Finish have created stuff like Jago and Lightfoot, the Paternoster Gang, Torchwood 1, Torchwood Soho, Robots, Dimension Canon. The list goes on and on and on. There really is a plethora of spin-off ideas, and I hope the unit show is the first of many. But what do you think? What kinds of predictions and wishes do you have for this show? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time. And an extra special thank you to my Asbantum level patrons Fallon Cortez and Nathan Gibson, my Platinum level patrons Maximilian Foreman and Nick's Games, and all my Gold level patrons Boots, Calvin, Daniel Shillito, Francois aka Line Vortex, Herna Verzog, Tom Azar, and Tifa Simp. Thank you so much for your support.